Greetings and salutations, everyone. Happy Labor Day. I hope everyone has a wonderful and safe holiday. Today I have some terrifying encounters to share with you. Before we get into those, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. They are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. The links to those are also in the description as well. Now, everyone, I have taken too much of your holiday already. Let's get on with today's upload, shall we? Briefly, in yesterday's video, for all of those who decided to not read or listen to anything I said, I did make a comment in the comment section. I said it 2 times in the video, maybe 3, and made a short about this. I never once said that was a rougarou. What I thought fascinating was the conversation that the pharmacist had with the customer. This was in a Louisiana hunting forum. I never once said, this is a rougarou. I said rougarou or not. Apparently, some people just like to comment to comment. I don't know if the IQ is gerbil-sized or not, but anyway, I'm not going to dwell on that too much. Thank you for all those who support me, though, on that, and that understood. Today's first encounter. I'm a 26-year-old male living in South Korea while in the Army. I grew up in Southern California, and my parents took me and my brother camping constantly in Mammoth Mountain, Grand Canyon, etc. I'm rarely unfamiliar with this type of stuff, but I saw a haunting video of clearly a corpse-like person screaming for help in the woods, and it threw me through a ringer, as it triggered a memory I had when I was around 8 or so while camping in Big Bear. We were on a very domesticated camping site, lights, hard site, latrines, water. No one could have possibly been lost there. I woke up around what would have been 0200 to someone wailing and moaning in the night. It still gives me the worst shakes and goosebumps just remembering it now. It was so terrifying, I couldn't even move. I was in the tent with both my folks and my brother. I can't remember if I asked them the following day or not about it. It could have been a fever dream, but I remember it so vividly and being absolutely terrorized. I know that I was awake. I don't think I could have made something up like that when I was 8 years old. I woke up purely because it was so loud and terrifying. For about an hour, I heard it wailing for help over and over again in a low pitch, then a raised pitch. It clearly was not calling for help due to pain or fear. It was wailing, but emotionless statements for help. Help! Help! There were maybe 3 to 5 second pauses before it repeated. It never said anything but help in this pattern for over an hour. It never explained why they needed help. It never even seemed frustrated that literally no one in the entire campsite was even calling out to it. It's tough to remember, but the voice sounded like it must have been a teenage boy. Our campsite was the furthest, in on a small cliff with a river below it that you could scale down to. There wasn't anything but woods behind the campsite, so I feel like that's where it must have been traveling through, which makes more sense why no one else in the campsite responded, or may have even heard it, other than our tent. I remember it never came extremely close to the tent, but its movement was obvious from the direction and volume of its voice changing. It traveled some distance, as it never stopped until it faded out and must have moved out of earshot. In the AM, I texting my folks to find out exactly what campsite it was at, to follow up with a better location and share with you guys. Here's the location. Big Basin, California. Semper Verens was the exact location this happened at. I tried to look up and see if there were any other similar events, but nothing that I could find. Today's second encounter. I'm 16, my friends and I were finally allowed to go camping alone for the end of summer. We went to a lake 10 kilometers out into the countryside. The campsite was very quiet and was surrounded by woods, and there was an old abandoned house in the middle of the woods that belonged to the old president. There have already been rumors and articles about the house itself being haunted, but that's the least of my concern. We ended up being alone at the campsite, which was lucky, we thought, although it was great, and we had a lot of fun up there until the last night. My friends slowly started heading back to the tent. It was around 12:20, 12:30 in the morning. Me and one other friend of mine were the last ones to stay out. I was walking around the campfire while he was just on his phone. I was just about to tell him that we should wrap it up and put the fire out and go to sleep. As I walked up to him, I heard a branch snap, roughly 20 to 30 meters away from us, close to the line of woods. At first, I thought it was nothing, but I just wanted to make sure, so I told my friend to be quiet for a moment. We sat in silence for, I'd say, only a few seconds before hearing another branch snap, and this time we both heard it, as it sounded like a large stick breaking. We immediately got up and put the fire out and rushed into the tent. I told my other friend and my cousin about the branch snapping, and we all tried not to worry about it, but we did feel uneasy about it. We lied in silence, talking every few minutes, keeping conversations to a minimum to listen out for any other noises. A while later, our campfire relit from the hot ashes and embers, and we all stared at the small flame through the walls of our tent. Suddenly, our hearts stopped for a second after hearing a disturbing, high-pitched scream coming from deep inside of the woods. I was really stressed and anxious after hearing that, and so were my friends and my cousin, who is 18, which I least expected to panic in the situation. Right after that first scream, we heard an identical same-pitch scream, but the second time was a lot louder and seemed closer. I was panicking and hyperventilating, and I was not trying to change anything, so I immediately called my mom and asked her to pick us up. It was about 1 or 2 in the morning, and after a few drinks, she said she couldn't pick us up, and everyone else was asleep. I ended up falling asleep 30 minutes later with the camping knife beside me. I felt fine the next day. I don't know what it was, but from what I've been seeing on the internet, it reminded me of a skinwalker scream. The thing is, I live in Ireland. Today's third part of the upload is a gentleman I reached out to. And he emailed me back. Hopefully I can get him to come on the show. He's very insightful and has been doing some research around Skinwalker Ranch and other things like that for a while now. This is a theory he has on Sasquatch. Trey Hudson toured Afghanistan with the U.S. military and now heads up a paranormal hunting group. One particular experience has convinced him that the legendary Bigfoot exists. A paranormal investigator has claimed one of his team witnessed the legendary beast Bigfoot rumored to roam North America, but it vanished without a trace. Trey Hudson, who is the director of the Oxford Paranormal Society and served in the U.S. military in Afghanistan as operations and counterterrorism officer, stated that the phenomenon he says his team would witnessed. He has been leading paranormal expeditions at the top secret location known only by its code name, The Meadow, and his new book, The Meadow Project, explores into the South's Skinwalker Ranch, has just been published, leaping to #1 in Amazon's paranormal section. Over the years, Trey claims to have witnessed some truly bizarre things, and one of the expeditions has made him consider Bigfoot could be more than flesh and blood and have special powers. A being described as similar appearance to Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, was allegedly spotted by a member of his team in the middle of the night in a chilling encounter. Recalling the event, Trey said at about 2 or 3 in the morning, he saw a white humanoid-type shape peering around a tree watching the camp. He went to get one of our team members who has a very sensitive piece of thermal equipment, a very expensive FLIR unit, to see if she could detect the heat signature of this being, and by the time she woke up and gathered her wits and equipment and got out there, the entity or being was gone. Even weirder, he said, there was also no physical evidence of the figure or animal standing in the same spot when they investigated. Trey added, "It was interesting to note many members of my team are also trained in tracking. We know how to track a person through the forest, look for footfalls, disturbances in the environment, compressed earth, compressed vegetation, etc. We went to the area where they had seen this creature, looking for any disturbed vegetation, scuff marks in the bark on the trees, and we could find no evidence this creature was there in physical form. Of course, a plausible explanation for there being no evidence of the figure standing in the spot could simply be because it never existed in the first place, but Trey remains open-minded about the Sasquatch theory and believes the experience proves the mythical creature is both a living animal and a dimension-hopping manifestation. He explained human beings have these amazing abilities to transcend our three-dimensional nature, so we can actually project ourselves, our thought form, into other dimensions. It is not reasonable to think that maybe Bigfoot and other animals also have these abilities. Maybe their abilities are either on par or exceed our abilities, and they can transform in and out of existence at will. Is Sasquatch flesh and blood? I think yes. Is Sasquatch maybe paranormal? Maybe the answer once again is yes. Is Bigfoot transdimensional? Once again, maybe the answer is yes. Now, like I said prior to sharing that with you, I am in touch with Trey, and I do hope to have him on the show very soon. He seems like one heck of a nice guy. He seems like he knows his shit too, and I think it'd be very cool, and I'd be very honored if he did appear on the show. So hopefully soon. Keep your fingers crossed. I am. Today's final encounter. I spent 10 years of my youth homeless, drifting across Canada, hitchhiking and riding freight trains across every province. I never knew where I wanted to call home, so I just traveled to this beautiful country to see which places I liked best. I have many years of experience with trapping and wilderness survival, so being stranded in places has never really been an issue for me. In this particular experience, it happened in the summer of 2013. I was hitchhiking out of Williams Lake, British Columbia. It was getting late, and I was having a hard time getting picked up on the small shoulder at the edge of town, until one man pulled over and said, "I can't drive you very far, but there's a roadside rest stop a few kilometers down the highway, and I think you may have better luck there." I agreed. The man drove me to the rest stop, and from there, I pulled out my cardboard sign that said East in a bold black Sharpie. I stood there for a couple of hours to no avail, until finally it got too dark. And obviously your chances of being picked up at night are very slim. I decided to hike off into the woods to set up my tarp and sleeping bag, and my plan was to sleep throughout the night, and into the morning I would walk back to the highway and try again. So there I go, flashlight in hand, walking into the brush off the highway. I've always had a hard time sleeping in trucks and big rigs, so I hiked about 200 and 250 meters into the brush off the highway so that some of the sound from the traffic would be deafening. Set up my tarp and an A-frame configuration between two trees, the tarp draped over a tight line of paracord and pinned down with tent pegs. This has been my go-to shelter for years. It was around 11 p.m., now pitch black outside. I didn't bother to get a fire going because I was exhausted from walking all day with my 30-pound backpack. I crawled into my sleeping bag and was out like a light. In the middle of the night, I was awoke to tree branches crackling from all around me. Big branches, whatever it was huge, and I heard heavy panting. But the scariest part is that it sounded kind of human and very close, right outside of my tarp. I thought it may have been a bear, but in my mind there is no way it was a human because I was in a pretty remote area, and it was like 3 in the morning. Super unlikely it would have been anyone deliberately trying to screw with me, and there were no cars parked at the roadside turnout parking lot earlier that night when I retreated into the woods. I'm positive nobody saw me walk into the woods. I was paralyzed with fear and lying perfectly still, holding my knife and my flashlight, which was turned off. Then the next thing I know, a huge log gets thrown and collapses my entire tarp on top of me. I started screaming as loud as I could and climbed out with my knife. I lit my flashlight, and whatever it was ran off into the bush. I never got a good view of it, but all I could see was very tall brush being rattled as it whipped through the woods. Then I looked at the log that had got thrown at me and was in awe. It missed my head by mere inches and pinned down my tarp into the dirt below. It was about 8 feet long, maybe 10 inches in diameter, and most definitely would have killed me. Built a fire using whatever sticks were lying around the small clearing where I had my camp. I kept looking in any direction with my flashlight. I was terrified. I figured if I had a fire, it may ward off whatever it was that I just had a close encounter with. At any rate, I had no intention of staying long. I took apart my shelter, rolled up my tarp, packed everything up, because I was getting the hell out of there. It took some serious muscle to move the log and get my tarp unstuck. Once I was packed up, I then walked back to the highway and waited until dawn before trying to catch a ride. I felt safer there. Whatever threw that log was no bear, and I know it was not a human. I initially thought the log might have broken off from a dead tree above, but that was not the case. All the trees in my vicinity were alive and well. It was thrown. Williams Lake, British Columbia. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed today's upload. Sorry for it being a little shorter. I wanted to get something out to you, but I definitely want to be able to enjoy my Labor Day. I am going to be getting in touch with a person who I know and have had on the channel a couple times. They got some stuff going on around their area, and where he lives is Dogman territory. So hopefully I can get him to come on and share what's been going on just recently. So anyway, with that, I want to bid y'all farewell. I hope you guys have a pleasant and safe day. And with that, farewell and see ya!